In 2018, we saw England reach the semi-finals of an international cup competition since 1996, and the first time we had reached a World Cup semi-final since 1990. We'll also be seeing England take part in the inaugural Nations League finals in Portugal next year. But at the same time as we celebrated the national team's successes, we also saw our country fall deeper into political turmoil, with Brexit negotiations between the UK and the EU, as well as between our government and Parliament, hit a new stumbling block on what seemed like a daily occurrence. Whether or not Brexit happens, we can agree that this country, as well as many other countries across the world, that national interests are becoming more right-wing, anti-immigrant and genuinely more inward-looking in a world which is becoming more and more globalised. One of the ways that the world has become more global is through sport and its appeal to foreign markets in the mass media. This year's World Cup in Russia was viewed by millions across the world, and World Cup fever hit China, a country which has only ever qualified for the World Cup once since its formation in 1930, and that was only as far back as the South Korea and Japan hosted tournament in 2002. But it's not just international competitions which attract the viewers. England's own Premier League and Championship, the Bundesliga in Germany and La Liga in Spain are the most viewed leagues in the world. Then surely it would make sense for an international club league, right? There's been talk in recent months about a breakaway European Super League which has faced its plaudits and critics alike. But would it work? It works in other sports. It's worked in both codes of rugby for a while now. Outside of the international competitions like the Rugby World Cup and Six Nations, Rugby Union has two intercontinental divisions. The Pro 14 consists of teams from Ireland, Wales, Scotland, Italy and South Africa, and Super Rugby consists of teams from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina and Japan. Both of the top rugby league divisions in the UK and Australia feature teams from other countries. Australia's NRL features a team from New Zealand, whereas UK Super League has the French side Catalan Dragons, as well as another French team and a Canadian side in the division below. All teams involved are relatively strong in their respective division, so why couldn't this work for football? I spoke to Tom Rennie, broadcaster and commentator for TalkSport International, about his views on whether a European Super League could work.
Well, I think the European Super League is something that's emanated from the fact that financial fair play as an idea, as an ideal, it hasn't worked. It will not work. The idea behind it from a UEFA perspective was to try and stop clubs living beyond their means, stop having Portsmouth type situations. The reason the big European clubs like Juventus got it through is because they wanted to keep the order as it's always been. If you were good in 1953, you're going to be the top of your league, the top of Europe forever. And there's been usurpers over the last 15 years. Roman Abramovich's money, the money at Manchester City, the money at Liverpool, at United, all these international investment firms, and that happens across Europe as well. Roma, an example of one in Italy, but it's happening everywhere. You're at a stage now where even Fat Ronaldo is investing in clubs in Spain. Why? Because he thinks if he invests enough, he'll get some success out of it. And maybe we're backed by an investment fund and he can do that. So I think that was the goal behind it. And this is one of those things where it's never going to work between these two entities. These clubs are always going to want a bigger share of the pot because they feel like they get the biggest audiences domestically and internationally. But they never realise that when they've got no one to play, it's dull, it's boring, it's useless. It goes against what the fans have loved for over 100 years, and that's competitive sport. So you've got people like Juventus, and Juventus have made the league so dull and boring in Italy, they think, wow, we need to get another league, we've got to do something else. We need to make sure we hoard all this money. What would be good for them is to have a more collective bargaining model to make other teams better. It'll do Juve a favour to not win the league 3 years running. They can't see that. The insanely arrogant people who run Bayern Munich. I mean, Uli Hoeneß, he literally went to prison for tax evasion, and then he tells us what he thinks we should be doing with our sport. It's incredible. The man is scum. He's literally scum. And yet he comes high-handed. Bayern Munich are the most important club in Germany, and thereby we should have more power and more money than everyone else. And unfortunately, that is how it works. And they've won the league, I think it's 5 years running. And they basically win it every other year throughout history. The best thing that can happen to them is sharing the money out equally. So they've gone, right, what do we do? What do we do now? We've got all the money in Italy. We've got all the money in Germany. Man United, got all the money in England, but they're not a great football team anymore. Let's do this league. Let's come up with this European Super League where there's no relegation. I think it's for X amount of years. Is it 10 years, 20 years until you get relegated? I mean, it's a great idea when it comes to hoarding the cash. And all these clubs now are run by businessmen thinking about the financial model and not about supporters. In 1992, you got a ticket for a Liverpool Man United game for the equivalent of about £11. That's in today's money. It was about £5 in 1992 money. That game now is over 70 quid. That's where we are with football. It's become a business. It's been taken from people by businessmen. And that's what this European Super League is. Two things come from this. Number one is we do get a European Super League. And as far as I'm concerned, it'll die on its arse. It'll die on its arse because once you've had 3 years of Bayern playing Real Madrid, you'll be a bit like, oh, I don't want to see this game again. And also, Bayern Munich finished bottom. Of a European Super League of 16, they'd finish bottom. And where's your international fan base then? No one wants... If you're a glory hunter, you don't want to see your team finish bottom. So it happens and it's success for a couple of years, and then it's a bit like, oh, wow, this is not very interesting. And hopefully the individual bodies, like the Football Association and all the individual countries, they go, well, if you leave, you ain't coming back. And if you come back in the 7th tier. That'd be fantastic. I'd love to see that happen. Or what happens is the Champions League gets expanded even more. The domestic leagues lose a couple of clubs. So England goes to 18, Serie A goes to 16, the league the same. Maybe a few less so they can get another couple of rounds of Champions League football in. But you look at the TV figures for the Champions League, and even the big clubs, Paris Saint-Germain against Liverpool, group stage, people don't care. People en masse don't care about group stage football. They don't care about preliminary rounds. This sort of stuff doesn't sell. They don't seem to get this, these people, because they're not football people. So the European Super League, I think, is just one of those things that businessmen have come up with. They think it's a great idea. I don't think any of them could do 5 kick-ups.
So, the opinion of Tom wasn't exactly a positive one towards a European Super League, and he isn't the only one to have that opinion. Of course, one of the main talking points at the moment, and probably will be for the rest of our lifetimes, is Brexit. Although, when it comes to an expansion of football in the form of a European Super League, I thought I'd get the opinions of someone who is an advocate for the European Union and is also the MP for Ealing North, Steve Pound. I asked him whether he thinks that the international expansion of club football is a good idea in the current political climate.
I mean, I'm not entirely sure that the idea of a sort of European Super League is a good idea. I mean, I think one of the amazing things about our sport in Europe is that when we have the World Cup in football, and that means every team in the world plays for the cup. In baseball, when you have the World Cup, that's actually the New York World, which is a newspaper. It's nothing whatever to do with the world, because there's only 3 countries in the world play baseball. So in some ways, it's very difficult to separate the universality of the game, and there can be no game which is on the one hand more basic than football, on the other hand more incredibly subtle. It's sort of symphonic. Sometimes it's crossing ballet and symphony and well, WWF basically. So up here up at Ellen Road, yeah. So I think what we got is a strange contrast here. On the one hand, there's a growth of nationalism throughout Europe, and when I was your age, Alex, I would have thought that countries would have been coming together. As it is, there's 14 nationalist movements at the moment. Not just in Scotland, not just in southern Poland, not just in the Basque Country, not just in the Bretons, but right the way across. So people are coming apart. But football doesn't seem to be separating. They say that Italy is a country which is united by only one thing, and that is football. The only thing that all Italy has in common is football. So it can be the great unifier. Sport is often seen as a continuation of warfare by other means. But in reality, sport in the global context can be liberating, and it can bring people together. It can cause huge problems. But I think in many ways, teams that play together and you get to know people, playing football in West London all those years ago, I didn't know people from the north. I had no idea. By that, of course, I mean Hampstead. But from up north. But so we got this strange contrast: football and sport generally. I think virtually every sport, with the possible exception of synchronised swimming, has an international aspect to it. And so as countries are withdrawing into cultural groups, and I think there's a real issue of the ethnicity of the groups, and you have all sorts of counter strings, like obviously all the Kosovars playing for Switzerland, and you get this sort of extraordinary situation there. But it's almost like the world's moving in 2 directions. Sport is moving to unify the world, whereas politicians and people are moving to disaggregate the world.
Although both of my interviewees didn't entirely agree that a European Super League may be a good idea, I still believe that this could be the way that club sport could be heading over the next decade or so. Whether or not it's a good idea for football is still something we have to find out for ourselves. But as we've seen with the NFL in London and Toronto's Wolfpack's rise in Canada, club sport being played at an international level still has a lot of interest from people across the globe.